Today is January 18th, 2023. I am Jennifer Andrulli, and I am here with Eva Burk. We are on Zoom. I'm zooming in from La Tigra, Costa Rica, on the traditional lands of the Malku tribe. And Eva is zooming in from Nenana, Alaska. Thank you so much for agreeing to be interviewed today. As you know, we will be talking about the various uses of plants. This and other recordings regarding ethnobotany, ethnomedicine, and traditional healing will become part of the oral history collection at the University of Alaska Fairbanks and will be placed online in an ethnobotany project jukebox hosted by the university.
Eva Dawn Burk sa Uzra, Tagatili to Ethnobotany Eslana. I'm Eva Dawn. I'm from Nenana and Manly Hot Springs. I'm Danae Athabaskan. And did you want me to continue?
Yeah, please.
I do a lot of work in food sovereignty and food security, but really focus on healing through food and culture. And so to do this work, we've started a small business and a nonprofit, and we're working to build an Indigenous land center under our nonprofit, Tlad and Eldel. And my small business we work with both tribes and a lot of other Indigenous people interested in agriculture across the state. And we also are starting to expand into working with the university as far as educating university researchers and students, providing a cultural immersion experience so they can better understand our worldview and maybe our lifestyle and what is important to an Indigenous community, especially in rural Alaska. So there's a lot of moving parts, but we really focus on creating space for healing and learning and bringing together all different generations. So I was really excited to have started this work in the past 5-6 years now.
Thank you so much for your work. And you had told a story last year about climate change, and that is a part of what inspired you to work with food security and food sovereignty. Can you share that?
Yeah, there's, I really had a dream about and saw that we were going to have these really hard times, and that food was going to become this critical piece of our reclaiming ourselves and being able to be resilient in the face of many changes, right? And so I also realized how much food is medicine too, and that also there are a lot of plants out there that are foods that we have lost our relationship with, and that's another thing that we need to reclaim. And so when I think about what climate change is bringing for us, we moved around and we were more nomadic, and we built things from the land so that if one area needed to regenerate, then that we would move on to a different area. And I also think there's some spirituality involved in that, knowing, how did they know to which area to move to, right? Like, how did they go out and look for that? Was it a physical? Was it spiritual? How they determined to move next? So that's something, thinking about my dream and how did I know, this is what needs to happen next. And there's a lot of changes that we're seeing from climate change, especially with the plants and vegetation, with water, snow, ice, all of these different things that define Alaska, our environment. And one of the biggest changes that I know is coming is it's going to be a lot warmer. And our elders predicted that this space that we're in now, especially in the interior of Alaska, would turn into a grasslands. And that's actually, I was told that story to university researchers, And they said that their climate models actually align with our elders' predictions. And so that's interesting to think about that, but to think about, we are seeing declines in our fish and moose, some related to climate change, but others related to increased population pressure, but also the regulation systems. And so with salmon, that's a really big gamble for us I don't believe that we're going to be able to rely on salmon in our interior rivers, specifically the Yukon and Tanana rivers. I don't think we'll be able to rely on salmon over the next decade or two, and hopefully people change to increase those populations. But similarly to the salmon, what we're seeing from climate change is the brushing up, a lot of hardwoods taking over. And we used to do a lot of slash and burn, and, thinking about what was our fuel supply for heat before we had chainsaws and all that, it would be a lot of this smaller brush that would be continuously clearing out. And now that we're not practicing that, that will affect the migratory patterns of the moose. And so you're seeing them moving into other areas that are more open, that don't have that brushing up. Areas that didn't have willows before that now do have willows, and that, the moose are going to follow that line of vegetation down. And we are now fixed, so we can't follow the moose in that vegetation down. Same with the salmon. The salmon are productive in Bristol Bay. The only wild stock that's truly productive is in Bristol Bay. All the other salmon streams are struggling. That puts us in this handicap of needing to look at agriculture, but also looking at what traditional foods do we have. Beaver is in abundance. Some of our natural plants, like I said, the brushing up, some of our natural plants are in abundance. So how can we learn to harvest them, but also create really awesome recipes like pesto, or sauteing them. I've seen, pickling even fireweed shoots, like these different ways of enjoying traditional plants and putting a modern flair on it. I think it will help in bringing people back to that plant and building a relationship with it again.
And when we practice slash and burn to create the environment for the moose, well, then there would be following year a lot of fireweed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and that's something that we want to practice on our land that we bought is, can we slash and burn? How are we managing our willows and our hardwoods? I wonder, and we're also thinking about soil remediation and hemp as a cover crop to enhance our soil. But say if others are, we have a lot of native land out there, and what happens if agriculture runs off? Can we build a hemp buffer to protect further degradation of the land downslope? So. And I'm thinking in my head, can we make a food for bison? Because that is kind of that's a hard thing. Like right now, for example, the hay situation in Alaska was rough this past year, which puts people who rely on that, whether it's for cattle or bison, in a situation. And so I thought, what other ways can we create food? Would hemp and willow make a good bison pellet? I don't know. So would hemp and willow make a good fire pellet? We don't know these things until we try them. And so I'm excited also to do a little bit of experimentation as we move into this space. And I think that's in line with what one of our elders would have done is how do I use these materials around me for the things that I need, for how my life will change? Like, how can I start to experiment and understand these things better?
Thank you. Please share more about some of the traditional plants in your region that have a possibility of, like, forest gardening or even using traditional plants in a modern agricultural field?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ones, and the landscape is going to change out on that land as you move like east to west. There's a fire scar on much of it right now, so it's just regenerating. But when I look at what is out there right away, we do have some blueberries. We do have Labrador tea. We have the fireweed, the yarrow. We also have a lot of cranberries, and raspberries is something that propagates pretty easy. And then also things like the trees, like the willows and the cottonwood, and also the spruce and the birch. Each one of those trees we use for something. And so we're hoping to provide this way of doing the land preparation to other people interested in farming, because they're coming in and we don't want them to just have a plan. What our advising, I see it as like a few steps, is one is just spending time with your land and understanding how it changes with the season and documenting that, like when the snow melts, when it's at its coldest, when it's in the middle of the summer, what it looks like in the fall. And then delineating when you're on that land, like I said, it's a fire scar regenerating. So we're looking, where are the really nice spruce and birch stands, and how can we, leave those areas and promote growth? And that, to me, I know there's going to be brush. You're going to have to clear out brush to keep the spruce and birch healthy, but also delineating the areas where you have, how you have a tree line and you have the different plants next to that. And so where are our high bush cranberries? Where are the low bush? Where are the blueberries? Where is the Labrador tea? And if we have blueberries and Labrador tea together, we will start to manage the blueberry bush with these specific techniques of pruning and clearing out some of the Labrador, So we want to, before we plan anything for the land, we want to see what natural products, I hate to say that word, but, natural things that we use, where are those out on our land, and how can we propagate them and care for them so they're at their highest productivity and it's sustainable through the years. And then, so once we have, delineated kind of that land, we'll then go into our soils, and we plan to test the soils and use different things to increase the biological activity. So we're like going in, and we want everything to be as locally sourced as possible to build the soil up so it's as healthy and productive as it can be. And so that will be through composting and using some of our traditional plants too. I'm thinking like they said we'll need a lot of dry wood or sawdust. That will be our limiting factors. What in our compost studies we're learning. So we're like, how do we make sure that we're using the, collecting the right amount of greens and browns that are next to us on the land? And how do we do that in a way that benefits the land but benefits us as well? So like willows is one of those things, the moose only want the first year shoots. So that willow, that main willow that just grows every year, that's toxic. So you want to get rid of that. You just want those new shoots for the moose. And the rest of that willow we can use for heat or compost, whatever makes sense, whatever, because willows are hard to work with, right? And that's the thing too, is like when you're identifying your plants and the things you want to use, also thinking about the amount of labor that goes into each of those spaces and areas. And so I'm really excited because my daughter is really interested in ethnobotany, and we've got another young person on our team who's also starting the ethnobotany program, as well as a couple of elders. And so it'll be really cool to see all of us out there on the land and creating this really cool plan for this space, and not trying to do it in one season, but rather in several seasons as we build a relationship. Because I think that's what people are like, we're trying to bring that back. Like, don't just see a piece of land on a map, say, I'm going to buy that, and then come in with your square box plan without even getting to know the land and what it already has for you before you try to alter and change that landscape. So that will be a big part of what we're doing and what we'll try to teach the neighboring farms as well as the state of Alaska as they continue to want to sell our land. Maybe we can show others a better way to do it.
So I'm just really honoring your approach, the multi-generational family and involving communities and elders, apprentices, young people coming in, and then blending traditional ecological knowledge with agricultural technology.
Mm-hmm.
That's fascinating, and it's a rare project in Alaska and much needed.
It is really needed. In my degree, I'm getting my master's degree, and part of it is in sustainable agriculture. My minor, it's in natural resources management, but focusing on sustainable agriculture and rural development. And I wanted to go out in Alaska and work with different farmers, growers, producers, and learn from them and interview them. And it's been, I've been doing that. We've even gone to the Hopi Reservation and the Navajo Reservation. Even in Peru, where we were at, there was a permaculture site. So, we've been traveling around, and what I've realized is in Alaska, we don't have this place where people can go and, Calypso provides farming, and you can go to their farm and stay there and do an intensive farm training. But if you think about agriculture, how does it conflict with fishing and putting up fish, right? So a big part of our agriculture, and this really resonates because we've held several Indigenous agriculture trainings, everyone goes to fish. I mean, we start with agriculture, but the conversation goes immediately to fish, and it stays there. And I realize that's where we're at. We are trying to adapt, but it's hard. And like I was telling you earlier about my memories of what does it mean to be at fish camp and who's there and how long you're there, and that you're not in and out, that you're actually living in relationship to that space with your family all summer. And I was realizing if we're going to do agriculture, you have to have this place where you have set it up for both agriculture as well as producing fish. And if you go to our fish camp in Nenana, that's what you'll see, a big garden as well as a smokehouse and some shacks that can be used to process fish, moose, vegetables. Right? And so we make big wooden cutting tables that we use to process whatever it is that comes in. And so that's how we're setting up our spaces, and that differs just a little bit from Calypso. They don't have a smokehouse or drying racks. And so this summer we might be having the first group of Indigenous agriculture come down to Nenana and split up our training so people can see how we're doing things in Nenana, but then also go up to Calypso and see this much more, it's much more advanced farm. It's been there for 20 years. So there's a lot of different crops and space that's been, worked, whereas we're just breaking ground. But I think that breaking ground piece is also helpful for people to see, because they're like, you can start here and you can go here, and here's kind of how you do it, but it's going to be different for every village, so that's what we're trying to do. And it's a big task. I'm really excited to have the intergenerational team, because it wouldn't be possible without that. That's the sustainability, is having the multiple generations working together. That's what's going to make it sustainable.
And that builds resilience throughout the generations. With rising food costs, rising fertilizer costs, as we start to develop local systems, it will change the future. It is sovereignty. It is independence.
Yeah, and that's fish being at our camp. is excellent because it is an excellent source of fertilizer and compost. And Tim Myers out in Bethel grows a phenomenal amount of food on his land. And I believe a lot of his composting is done with salmon. And we actually use salmon. We'll make like a little brine. Call it the stink juice because it just kind of sits, and then you pull some of the juice liquid that forms, as it's decomposing, and then you mix that, dilute it with water, and add it to your garden. And it's not like you put that on there before you pick it. You want to add it and then do a few more waterings before you pick it, but it's excellent fertilizer.
And we can put that on the blueberries and the cranberries. Really doing some research to find ways to increase yield, sweetness, happiness of those fruit-producing bushes. How do you feel about bringing in plants? You had mentioned earlier that the interior Alaska will shift towards a grassland. So bringing in ferns from 100 miles south on the other side of the Alaska Range is the first ferns, or even in Manly Hot Springs, there's ferns there, and bringing those closer.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I think we need to look at. And I've never thought about what does it look like to move some of those plants from the southern area more north, but it makes a lot of sense if you think about the way things are shifting. A lot of stuff that is more southern is starting to move into northern parts, and we do need to be thinking about that.
And carbohydrate-containing plants, those are so important for our diet. So I know it by Indian potato, right? Masu. Mm-hmm. But as we develop our harvesting, where we're harvesting the traditional root plants, the harvesting becomes easier. The roots get bigger. The plants start to spread in response to our interest and that prayer and care that we take when we work with plants.
That's really interesting. It's important to think about prayer because last summer when we did our first garden, we actually broke the entire willow root structure and planted in one season. And ideally, we would have broke the willow root structure, composted, and then planted the next season, right? But an elder told me I was blessed and that anything I touch will come out good. And I was like, I don't know. But we had tomatoes and tomatillas and little chilies, and we darn near had corn silks, and with not as much input as a person would expect for some of these more delicate and fussy crops. We had a late start smoky season. I mean, the odds were stacked against us, and we still produced hundreds of pounds of food. And I really feel like that was because there was a lot of prayer and a lot of good intention put into that space, because we weren't doing that for ourselves. We were doing that because we wanted to build something for the community. We wanted to build something for the elders and youth. And I watched all of the elders drive by almost every day, so this area of tribal land that had kind of just been on the outskirts and sat most of the year is now being revitalized and now this place where people come to have a cup of coffee and talk, to have some food. We often have a lot of salmon spread or moose soup out. And so we just realized, they say, build it and they will come. And it's so corny, but it's actually true. It's actually true. And we're seeing it happen. There's just this massive amount of interest that even sometimes I'm like, I didn't think people would take to this or want to do this as much as I do, or see the importance of it as much as I do. But I'm just proven wrong every single day about how much people care and want to support. And that's exciting. And we did make a little medicine garden because we do want to make a little medicine garden with traditional plants because we want a place for our elders to be able to grab stuff. Because harvesting on the land does its own thing as far as healing, but sometimes you do need something that's just a little more easily accessible. And so we are wanting to make sure we're creating those spaces too that are easily accessible for our elders as they age and have limited, as far as they can go. And it's really cool to go out, going to Chistachina and meeting the Jessica Denny and her family and Lena Charlie. And Lena's 91 and has an amazing setup for, a rural area, smokehouse by the creek and, her moose hide tanning. And, that's what I think and seeing her get around her land and how it's set up. It helps me think about how I should be trying to lay stuff out for the elders to be able to come in and enjoy it.
I love that. Thank you so much for putting in a traditional medicinal garden. What are some of the plants that you would like to put in that garden?
We did, we put yarrow in. We had lots of yarrow everywhere, but we just went ahead and put it in the garden. And then we had stinkweed. And then we had, I don't think calendula is native to us, but it's something that we planted, and it did very well. So that was another one. And I know I'm forgetting a couple. The one that it looks kind of seedy. I'm forgetting its name. It's not yarrow. Maybe it is stinkweed early on. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
Would you accept donations if people brought you medicinal plants from around the state as they travel through Nenana? Is there room for them in your garden?
Yeah, as we expand, and that's definitely, when you mentioned like the ferns, I was like, I kind of slowed down because my head was like thinking Devil's Club ferns, like all these, like, I really love Devil's Club and it's not native to us. But it's something I barter for. I really like it. But yeah, I was just thinking about like how we could bring some of those plants in and what conditions do they need to thrive. But yeah, definitely open to doing a lot of experimentation. And I think just setting aside a space that is like, this is where we play around and see what we can do. And we did have people bringing by traditional plants. We did actually plant some strawberries, and I think there was a little bit of Labrador tea in there too, I think, with the strawberries. But we did plant those as well. And the strawberries is another wild crop it does phenomenal once it gets established. So definitely wanting to have a decent space for wild raspberries and strawberries. I think there's some benefits to doing domestic raspberries and strawberries, but the wild is kind of where my heart is. So I think we'll play with both and see what makes the most sense, but always have space for these wild varieties because those are our relatives and they belong in the space,
Growing up in interior Alaska, and then I moved to Anchorage area, there's plants that I miss from my childhood, like the strawberry plant, the strawberry blight plant with the really bright, sweet flower. And I miss the wild rhubarb.
We had rhubarb. We did plant rhubarb. Yes. Wild rhubarb. Yeah. And we actually do like food waste. We did a food waste jamming session where somebody was throwing out strawberries and we went in. And I knew that they had only been out for 2 days. And I was like, no, we're going to cut these fuzzy parts off and make jam with the rhubarb that we had. And we did. And we probably made, oh my gosh, over 10 cases of jam. Like we were jamming out.
And then
but it was cool to teach the kids that, like, don't throw it away. You do something else.
I love, making a map of the lands that I'm close to see where the cloudberry patches are. And